I was very high on Bryan Cook in this pre-draft process. I actually at times even compared him a little bit to TYRANN Mathieu, which, that's kind of one of those comparisons you make that really fits right when it happens. I had him as my number 40th overall prospect. So some people are saying, this feels like a reach, getting him late second round. I had him as an early second rounder. So I actually think this is a steal, not a reach. Because again, consensus big board had him around 90, I believe, which to me feels crazy low because I guess I get it. Like, okay, are there other guys who can run a faster 40 time than him? I'm sure. Although, athletically, he was also still very good. But what I really liked about him and what I value with safeties that I feel like people don't pay enough attention to is simply position. Positioning is so important with this at the safety position of just being in the right spot. And that's what I felt like Cook did such a good job of. So let's get into some film and talk about kind of what I liked about him. So first, something like this. One of the things I wanted to go back and refresh my memory on, because I couldn't remember it as much, was how well does he do against man coverage? Because that's something that in the Steve Spagnuolo defense, you better believe you're going to have to play some man coverage. Well, here's him doing exactly that. So it's going to be man coverage here as there is a single safety deep, but that is not Bryan Cook. It's the other safety. He is going to be covering a receiver who's running a route over the middle. These are dangerous routes that, especially against this for a safety, it's kind of difficult to, defend against this. Look at how right when this play begins, what you're going to notice is that, there's a little bit of space underneath, but that's okay because if the ball does get thrown there, Cook can run in and knock it away. He's not giving up too much space. Maybe a little bit more than you would like, but only a little bit. And I don't even know if I would feel that confident in this being too much space because he can move in pretty well. But one thing that Cook is also doing a great job of, and this is kind of what reminds me of TYRANN Mathieu a little bit, is he's still keeping an eye on the quarterback. This is, that's what Mathieu does all the time, right? Is even in man coverage, he's keeping an eye on the guy he's supposed to cover while still finding a way to spy on the quarterback. So if the ball gets thrown somewhere else, he can still find a way to make the play. Well, that's what Cook is doing. Look, as you see, the longer this play develops, Cook kind of does the same thing. If he, again, at any point, if that ball was thrown, he would have had a chance to make a play on it. But also, if it was thrown somewhere else, he would have had a chance to make a play on that as long as it was somewhere in his area due to him just paying attention to the quarterback. So that's what I like about him, is he's just someone who is always aware, and at the safety position, that is the number one important thing I want you to be, is just a smart player, and he's a smart player. Going over to something like this, he still has the physical tools though, and that's what I want to be clear on. He's not some unathletic guy who can outsmart his problems. No, like he's someone who, even if he was stupid, he'd still be a good safety, I think. Where what's happening here, again, kind of a unique scenario where he's almost playing like a corner position here. He's playing the, the zone I've circled in white, and you see the route that he's going up against. This can be dangerous for a safety, for sure. Look at how right when this play begins, you notice how the wide receiver who's going up against him is faking as though he's running over the middle, which could create some issues because, going over the middle there, that would obviously mean that for Bryan Cook, you have to pay attention to that. Cook has to be aware that if this is a deep route over the middle, he's going to have to cover him and turn his hips and get over there. So that's something you do have to respect. However, once the cut goes towards the outside, Cook just gives up no separation. So again, he's someone who he does not give up separation very often. And this is kind of the thing with safeties, is sometimes people overthink this. Like, he's just a good football player. And good football players typically end up being good no matter what level they're in. If you're a good college player, you're probably going to be a good NFL player, especially in this Spagnuolo scheme that I think really fits his skill set. Going on to stuff like this, where what's going to happen on this play, we don't have to break the whole play down necessarily, just know where he is. So he is going to be the free safety on this play, so he is the deep safety. And a bit of a side note, that is another thing I like about Cook, is that, I've gotten on some of these other safeties who I feel like are just good at one aspect of being a safety, whether that's free safety or strong safety. In the NFL, you have to play both if you're going to be successful, especially in a Steve Spagnuolo scheme. But anyways, watch how, okay, it's going to be a route over the middle that gets, well schemed up. It is open. It's kind of similar to what we saw Bryan Cook successfully cover earlier on in this video. But now you see at this spot, so okay, he has to make sure he makes a tackle here. You're in cleanup duty, which is something you're going to be in if you're a safety. As you see, he does do a good job of getting over and making a really impressive tackle, quite frankly, to be able to get the stop right there. So again, that's something I like about him, is that he can make a tackle as well. He is a complete safety. Going over here in the running game, this can come into play, and people don't typically think of what a free safety does in a single safety deep coverage. In the running game, typically your job is to not have to be in make a play in the running game. You don't want your free safety having to make tackles if there's only a single safety deep in a running play. It's different for like, okay, if you're in the box or if it's quarters coverage, then sure, you have to make tackles. This scenario, you don't want him to have to make a tackle. However, as you see right when this play begins, so the running back gets to the outside, and now Bryan Cook is kind of one of those guys who he's going to have to help make this play. But as you see, watch him take a really good angle, and he is going to be able to, again, just help make the tackle. So he takes good angles, is constantly in position, and still is a good athlete on top of all of that. So really, I feel like Bryan Cook has gotten massively underrated in this entire draft process. Expecting a late second round rookie to be the next Tyrann Mathieu, or even a Tyrann Mathieu replacement and someone who can fill that role, is a lot to ask of a guy, right? I mean, you're putting even me, who's someone who had Bryan Cook very high up, 40th overall for safety, which is where I had him on my board. That's very high for me because I take positional value into account. Getting him at 60, I think, is very good. Even with all of that, it's going to be a lot to ask of him to be Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu obviously got a big payday for a reason. He is a very good player, and it's just going to be difficult for anyone to replicate that. But again, Reed can be someone who can help replicate that, and maybe you just don't even need to replicate that. You can say, hey, we have two good safeties now. Maybe it's not going to be the same exact thing that we had last year, but quite frankly, it's better to have two good safeties than it is to have one awesome safety and one bad safety, which is, one Thornhill's all right, but it's still, that's kind of what certainly what they had at times last year with Sorensen, who just, no getting around it. He wasn't good last year. So replacing, both of those two guys, definitely an important thing for this Kansas City team to do. And you still have Juan Thornhill, so he could be potentially he's a plan B for sure. But I think Bryan Cook is that plan A, and getting someone who you're expecting to be a starter is incredible value at number 60, and that's also why I love drafting safeties in round 2. What's the thing I always say? Day 2, you always want to make sure you get at least one safety or wide receiver. Well, they got a wide receiver and safety in round 2, not just day 2. So because of that, I think that this is a very good pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's position of need, and I think he'll be very effective. Again, I could see some Antoine Winfield type vibes from Bryan Cook. I really could, of just a guy who, can come out and just really make plays. And I'm really confused as to why he fell so much. Like, I looked at his negatives, and most people's negatives said, like, it could be a little bit better in man coverage. I thought his man coverage was fine, but even if I give you that, like, that's still, like, that player is still probably worth taking, higher than pick 60, and certainly higher than pick 90, which is where he was, around at the consensus big boards. So he's just one of those guys I'm surprised fell so much, and I think that he'll probably play closer to, even though typically when you have these reaches, more often than not, because again, reach compared to the consensus big board, typically more often than not, the consensus big board is right, as opposed to the NFL team that reached for a player. I think this might be the exception. It's hard to pick exceptions. It's very, very difficult, but I think this might be the exception because I really like him. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on Bryan Cook to the Kansas City Chiefs? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.